After scrimping and saving for 15 years while squeezed into a tiny downtown apartment, James finally clutched the keys to his dream home, a cozy 1960s ranch with a sprawling yard that dwarfed his old concrete balcony. The house was a fixer-upper, but the previous owner, a master carpenter, had left behind a breathtaking Japanese-inspired garden that James's golden retriever, Buddy, instantly declared his domain. That first weekend, James installed a custom wooden gate, a piece he'd commissioned from a local craftsman who used reclaimed barnwood. The gate was a work of art, its hand-carved panels tracing James's journey from his quiet hometown to the bustling city and, at last, to this haven. 3 days later, while James was on a video call with clients, Buddy started barking wildly. Peering through the window, James saw a woman in a crisp white pantsuit meticulously photographing his gate, measuring it with a laser tool and jotting notes on a tablet. Before he could wrap up his call, she was striding up his walkway, her leopard print heels tapping the concrete like little hammers. "I'm Patricia Evans, HOA president," she declared when he opened the door, skipping any small talk. She shoved a red violation notice at him. "That gate is 17 inches tall, over the height limit, and uses unapproved materials. You have 14 days to remove it." James tried to explain he hadn't received any HOA rules yet, but Patricia cut him off with a tight smile. "Ignorance isn't an excuse. Welcome to Pinewood Estates." As she strutted off, his neighbor across the street caught his eye and mimed a drinking gesture. Later that evening, she swung by with a bottle of wine and an unofficial rundown. "We call her HOA Karen. She's driven out 3 families in the last year alone." James showed up to his first HOA meeting with questions, hoping to understand the rules and, if needed, bring his gate into compliance. He didn't expect to step into what felt like a rehearsed play, with Patricia as the lead. When his turn came to ask about gate height limits, it spiraled into Patricia unveiling a slideshow of community violations, his property front and center. "This is what happens when city folks move in," she proclaimed to the 30 homeowners in the room. "They bring their urban mess with them." A few residents squirmed, but no one spoke up. Then James noticed something off. The photos included a pink flamingo, a satellite dish, and a teal mailbox, none of which were his. "Excuse me," he cut in, "I don't own those." Patricia's smile stiffened. "Maybe you should keep a closer eye on your property, then." After the meeting, an older man caught up with James in the parking lot. "I'm Walter. Been here 20 years. Patricia's had her eye on your lot for months. Her daughter wanted it, but you outbid her. The gate's just her excuse." That night, James couldn't sleep. By 3 a.m., he was deep into researching HOA laws, property rights, and the neighborhood's history. At sunrise, he learned the HOA's architectural committee hadn't updated its guidelines since 2018, and the original developer's plans allowed artistic expression on property boundaries, including gates. The next morning, James found an orange sticker on his mailbox deeming it non-compliant, the same mailbox that came with the house. Determined to fight back, he began snapping daily photos of his property. 2 days later, while planting shrubs in his front yard, a sleek SUV with tinted windows rolled by for the 3rd time that hour. The window slid down, revealing Patricia in oversized sunglasses despite the overcast sky. "You know," she called out, not bothering to get out, "the architectural committee has rejected those exact shrubs 4 times in the past year. Too tropical." James glanced at his plain boxwoods. "These are the same ones at the community entrance," he replied coolly. "Are they?" Patricia's voice oozed fake concern. "I'd hate for you to waste money on landscaping that'll have to go." She rolled up her window and sped off. That afternoon, a certified letter arrived. Fines of $75 a day for the gate, plus $50 a day for unapproved landscape changes. Inside was a note on Patricia's monogrammed stationery. "The board is concerned about your struggle to meet community standards. I'd be happy to recommend contractors to fix this quickly." The attached list featured only Wilson Family Contracting for gate removal and Wilson Landscaping Solutions for yard work, both tied to Patricia's relatives, charging steep rates. That evening, James's neighbor, Sarah, invited him over for dinner. "She targets anyone who doesn't fit her idea of the perfect neighbor," Sarah said, dishing out lasagna. Last year, the Patel family moved after she hassled them over excessive cultural decorations, just Diwali lights. James took a week off work, claiming a family emergency, and turned his dining room into a war room. He filed public records requests, interviewed neighbors, and hired a drone photographer to document every property in the subdivision. The pattern was clear. New residents or anyone who challenged Patricia got hit with violations, while her cronies got a pass for the same things. A retired lawyer 3 doors down, George Miller, had been gathering evidence for years but lacked support to act. "She forced me to rip out my roses, non-native plants," grumbled Mrs. Lynn, a 30-year resident. "Then she planted the same ones in the community garden and named them after herself." The breakthrough came when James uncovered Patricia's side hustle. Her brother-in-law owned the construction firm that snagged all the compliance contracts. Homeowners who resisted paid triple the market rate for fixes. Meanwhile, the harassment ramped up, violations for excessive bird feeding and an inappropriate garden hose color piled on. Patricia's SUV crept by daily, and anonymous noise complaints about Buddy barking flooded in, though James's security footage caught someone resembling Patricia blowing a dog whistle outside his fence at 5 a.m. One Wednesday morning, James opened his door to find Walter on his porch, clutching a battered box. "I've been waiting for someone like you," Walter said, handing it over. 7 years of records. "I thought I'd take this to my grave, but maybe you can use it." Inside were folders with before and after photos of forced compliance, contradictory HOA rulings, and testimonials from ex-residents who'd fled. A spreadsheet tracked property sales, homes buried under fines or harassment sold cheap, scooped up by shell companies linked to Patricia's son-in-law, a real estate investor. "It's a racket," George explained. "Force people out, buy low, renovate with family firms, flip for profit. She's made millions." James worked all night, piecing the data into an airtight case. At 2 a.m., his phone rang, a whispery voice. "This is Jessica Evans, Patricia's daughter." James's pulse raced. He didn't just build a case, he built a fortress. With George and 5 neighbors, he crafted a presentation fit for a courtroom. His nephew's offhand suggestion, "Why not try for a historical exemption?" proved genius. Research showed the property once belonged to a mid-century furniture designer whose workshop stood where James's gate now was. County rules protected such historical markers from HOA meddling. 2 days before the hearing, James installed a bronze plaque by his gate, registered with the County Historical Society, and emailed the board his documentation, offering to drop his appeal now that the issue was resolved. Patricia declared war, calling an emergency meeting at 7 a.m., an hour before James's appeal, and slapping him with a $200 a day fine. But James was ready. He'd filed an emergency injunction, and process servers ambushed the board as they arrived, naming them in a harassment and selective enforcement lawsuit. The next morning, James woke to yellow flags dotting his lawn, each labeled violation, and a sign screaming, "Pending inspection, potential environmental hazard." His phone rang before coffee. "George," buzzing. "They're claiming toxic soil contamination. It's a scare tactic to tank your property value." County officials in hazmat suits approached, but James calmly asked for paperwork. The order, signed by Patricia, not a county official, dated the day she'd been served. "Funny," James said loudly for the neighbors watching. "This was issued hours after her lawsuit papers. And I've got certified soil tests from last month, no contamination." The officials backed off to double-check. That night's board meeting drew a record crowd. Patricia arrived late, her polish fading, and froze when she saw James with a Historical Society officer and a State Housing Authority rep. "This isn't about a gate anymore," James began. His presentation, split-screen photos, financial records, and a history of bias, left the room stunned. The Historical Society confirmed the gate's protection. The Housing Authority launched a discrimination probe. James handed out a petition, signed by 78% of homeowners, demanding a board recall. As chaos erupted, the district attorney, Robert Langley, strode in with police, announcing a misappropriation and racketeering investigation. Patricia's protests fell flat. 6 months later, James lounged on his porch swing, savoring Pinewood Estate's transformation. A new board, with James as architectural liaison, rewrote the rules for fairness. His gate became a local gem, featured on Historical Society tours. Patricia went quiet after threatening lawsuits, especially as the DA dug into her kickback scheme. Her daughter, Jessica, listed their house and even apologized to James at the market. "I didn't expect this to unite everyone," James told his sister as Buddy chased butterflies. Potlucks boomed, Mrs. Lynn's community garden thrived, and George ran a legal clinic. Neighbors arrived for an impromptu gathering, and as Patricia drove by one last time before moving, James raised his glass. She nodded faintly and left. Victory, he realized, wasn't about beating her. It was about turning a war zone into a thriving community garden.